Yeah, the municipal election will be for a while.
Order. I call this Standing Committee on Natural Resources and Economic Development to order. My name is Tom Taggart. I'm the MLA for Colchester North and chair of this committee. Today we will hear from witnesses regarding the progress report on wind power. Before we start, I asked everybody to please turn off their phones and make sure that they're on silent. And in the case of an emergency, please use the Granville Street exit and walk up to the Grand Parade. I'll now ask the committee members to introduce themselves. I'll start on my left here, MLA McQuarrie.
Thank you. I'm Kyle McQuarrie, MLA for Inverness, and I'm the vice chair of this committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. Danny McGillivray, MLA for Pictou Centre.
Good afternoon, David Bowlby, MLA for Annapolis.
Good afternoon, Julie Van Exen, MLA for King South.
Ian Rankin, Timberlea Prospect.
Hi, I'm Krista Gallagher for Halifax Schmukta.
Hi, Susan LeBlanc, MLA for Dartmouth North.
And I would also like to note the presence of Legislative Counsel Genevieve Harvey and Legislator Committee Clerk Tamer Naseba. And the topic today is report on wind power, and I will welcome the witnesses and ask them to please introduce themselves, and then we'll begin with opening remarks. I'll start over here.
David Miller, Executive Director, Energy Planning, Department of Energy.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Karen Gatien. I'm the Deputy Minister of the Department of Energy.
Good afternoon, Lora, MacEachern, Deputy Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynne Bowen, the Executive Director of Policy and Environmental Assessment with Environment and Climate Change.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Adrian Fuller, the Executive Director of the Inspection, Compliance and Enforcement Division with Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you. And I believe Deputy Minister MacEachern, you have opening remarks?
Actually,
okay.
It's Deputy Gatien, if that's okay.
Okay, that'll be great. Yeah, Deputy Gatien.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by thanking the committee for the opportunity to showcase all that's been happening to bring our work on wind power to reality. Thanks to the efforts of so many people all pulling in the same direction, the momentum is palpable, with new wind farms going up on land and the call for bids process underway for the offshore. At one time, this all seemed very far away, but now we're getting really close to our goals and hitting lots of milestones on the way. On land, this work is outlined in the Clean Power Plan. It shows the path to be off coal and reach 80% clean energy by 2030. A critical component of that plan is adding about 1,000 megawatts of new onshore wind. It's the cheapest form of energy we have for generating electricity in Nova Scotia. That low price is locked in for ratepayers for 25 years through the power purchase agreement for each wind project that goes on the grid. So the more the more wind we add, the more stable power rates will become because it's cheaper. And because it means we are less exposed to swings in the volatile international fossil fuel market. So we can insulate ourselves from global price changes with these investments in local clean energy resources. We have procured or contracted 9 new wind farms since 2022. Together, they will deliver more than 850 megawatts of new clean energy to our grid and replace about 30% of electricity previously generated from imported coal. This increase will more than double the amount of energy generated by wind on our system. Benjamin Mills is one of these wind farms. It started delivering clean energy to the grid in December. Higgins Mountains is close on its heels and should be operational very soon. Weavers Mountain, Wedgeport, and Goose Harbor Lake should be online by the end of this calendar year. That means in the 13 months from December 2025 to the end of 2026, these 5 projects alone are adding 480 megawatts of wind to the grid. This is a huge leap and a dramatic change in our electricity system. and the other 4 wind farms in construction or development as we speak will be online by 2028. All these new projects are joining 300 wind turbines that were built through previous initiatives, and there are more to come through future procurements to make sure we meet our goals. All of these wind towers go up on land. We also see offshore wind on the not-too-distant horizon. As I mentioned, the overall process is well underway for Nova Scotia's first call for bids to license offshore wind. We look forward to Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator launching the actual call in the coming months. It will be an historic moment for Nova Scotia. The potential in harnessing this natural resource is huge, larger than almost any other clean energy opportunity in Canada. Offshore wind farms and transmission of their energy to markets through Wind West has the potential to bring billions in investments to our communities and thousands of jobs to our people. This opportunity puts us on the verge of a once-in-a-generation shift that could make Nova Scotia a have province. It is leveraging hundreds of millions in private investment across Nova Scotia, with many Nova Scotian suppliers and workers on these sites, all through clean wind power, and all built on the foundation of research, consultation, and engagement with key partners and interested parties. We are moving fast, to be sure, because we can't let these opportunities slip through our fingers to grow our use of clean energy and our economy. Together with the regulator, we are also doing all of our due diligence on the regulatory framework to build a safe and responsible industry that operates in harmony with others. We want everyone to be winners. That's ultimately what we're working toward. By developing our onshore and offshore wind, we want everyone to prosper from the economic benefits and the clean energy. I'll stop there, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Gatien. Deputy MacEachern, you have comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss environment and climate change's role in supporting Nova Scotia's transition to wind energy, critical work that we are proud to support. Our department has a dual role in advancing this transition. We lead the province's response to climate change, and we are the regulator. We are proud to lead Nova Scotia's response to climate change, important work that is guided by 28 goals in the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act. And as a reminder, key among the goals are by 2030 to generate at least 80% of our electricity from renewable sources, to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by at least 53% below the levels that were emitted in 2005, and to get off coal again by 2030, and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. These are among the most ambitious climate commitments in Canada, and we are confident we can achieve them. Why? Because Nova Scotia has a strong plan that is achieving results. Nova Scotia's Climate Change Action Plan, Our Climate, Our Future, with its 68 purposeful actions, is the roadmap to achieving our clean energy future, and I'm pleased to say that we are making significant progress on these actions. As a few examples, since 2021, we've invested about $250 million in energy efficiency programming that is helping families and businesses save money on their energy bills, reduce emissions, and reducing demand on our grid. In 2004, Efficiency Nova Scotia programming exceeded its provincial targets, saving 172.8 gigawatt hours of electricity and cutting 19,890 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. We successfully implemented an industrial carbon pricing system, the Nova Scotia output-based pricing system, which holds large emitters accountable for their emissions. I'm proud to say we can report that all participants are compliant, and $50 million has been collected to date, all of which supports climate change initiatives through the Nova Scotia Climate Change Fund. We have funded 6 energy manager positions since 2024 who are working with IWK, Shanex, universities, the Mi'kmaq communities, and the fishing sector and others to help them cut their energy usage and their emissions, and there's much more underway. All of this work reinforces a simple truth. Nova Scotians are demonstrating strong leadership, a clear vision, and a commitment to strategic, effective action in response to climate change. Our legislative goals are interconnected and dependent upon each other. For example, we cannot achieve net zero or reduce our emissions without transition to clean energy, a transition that requires clear, streamlined regulatory pathways for companies we need to help us with the transition. Which brings me to our second role as regulator. Our mandate comes from the Environment Act, which was designed to allow for environmental protection and economic development to coexist. It is not one or the other. Our job is to ensure companies understand and comply with environmental laws so that safe, responsible development can proceed. We have an entire division dedicated to this role. We are a responsive regulator, one that adapts quickly to new technologies, emerging opportunities, and evolving environmental risks, and one that is guided by science, evidence, and accountability to the Nova Scotians we serve. One example of this responsiveness is the changes we made last year to the environmental assessment process to help accelerate the transition to clean energy. And EA approval is the critical first step in the regulatory path for large-scale projects like wind projects. We've made it clear that all clean energy projects are part of our fast, robust 50-day Class 1 process, a move that signals to the wind energy sector that Nova Scotia welcomes projects that can help us transition to a new, more sustainable clean energy future. And as a testament to this, 15 wind energy projects have successfully come through our EA process in the last 4 years. Modernizing does not mean that environmental guardrails are gone. Nova Scotia has among the most stringent environmental standards in North America. Each project undergoes rigorous environmental oversight and transparent decision-making. Every approval we issue, every condition we set, and every safeguard we enforce ensures that projects proceed in a safe, responsible, and transparent manner. The urgency to transition to a clean economy is real, and so is our commitment to advancing this transition in a way that is responsible, safe, accountable, and aligned with the needs of Nova Scotians. So with that, I look forward to your questions and our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy MacEachern. So we're going to move on now to the question member from open the floor to questions from our members. I'm going to remind everybody to wait till their name's called and their light comes on before they start to speak, and so the Ledge TV knows to turn on the microphone. So we'll start the first round of questions with the NDP Caucus for 20 minutes, followed by the Liberals for 10 and the PC for 30. MLA LeBlanc, please.
Thank you very much. And thanks for being here, everyone. So as you said in your opening, Nova Scotia wind speeds are among the best in the world, and they even rival the winds of the North Sea, where we're seeing countries using wind power already, countries like Scotland and the United Kingdom and Denmark. And the offshore wind proposal and other wind opportunities show that we can harness our wind to produce enough clean energy to power Nova Scotia and then some. And it's an exciting opportunity. And I just want to begin by thanking the witnesses and the departments and all the people working on this for the work you're doing, and also to come here and answer some questions about it all. Whenever we're talking about new energy opportunities, we want to make sure that Nova Scotians are the first priority. And when it comes to Wind West, my question is, what are we doing to make sure Nova Scotians see the direct benefits to power our grid and lower people's bills? So, I mean, that's the main question. But right now, we're seeing, a possible 8% increase for Nova Scotia Power. And so people are really asking, how is Wind West going to help me and that reality? And so can I ask Deputy Gatien, what impact will offshore wind and that project have on people's power bills?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
Thank you for your question. I'll begin, and if David is leading a lot of our work on Wind West. So if he has anything to add, I'll certainly invite him to do so. Certainly, to be clear, in terms of the offshore wind that will be developed and subsequently transmitted through Wind West, it isn't intended necessarily for our grid to begin. A lot of this onshore wind that we're talking about in the Clean Power Plan and the batteries and the interties, that's all to kind of make sure that we have the energy we need to sustain our grid and to allow it to grow. But with the capacity that's out there for the offshore wind, certainly as we are able to attract higher energy using kinds of industries like a data center or a large manufacturing facility, and as the cost for offshore wind decreases, it will open up the opportunity certainly for Nova Scotia Grid should it need additional capacity. But the benefits really are around the development opportunities. So approximately, by the time we get to construction, it could be up to about 5,000 jobs during construction, over 2,000. These are estimates, over 2,000 when it's fully operational. Opportunities for port development, supply chain development. A lot of community benefits arrangements. We're looking at all of that as well to make sure that Nova Scotians do benefit from this industry as it evolves and gets developed. I don't know, David, if you have anything else. Oh, you're good? Okay.
Thank you. So MLA LeBlanc, please.
Thank you. So just to confirm, in your opening remarks, you talked about the Clean Power Plan, and I have a little graphic of it here. So you said that currently, with the new projects coming on line, we have 480 megawatts of new wind. So in that, in the new wind part of the Clean Power Plan, there's 480 megawatts. And are you saying that we will have 1,000 plus megawatts of wind? So meeting our Clean Power Plant, Clean Power Plan target for new wind by 2028. You mentioned that the rest will be here by 2028.
Recognized Deputy Gatien.
Yeah. So yeah. Short answer, yes. Yeah. So we have this first tranche, and then there'll be an additional tranche coming. But we are doing additional procurement, so we may, possibly exceed that. So we think by 2028, the projects that have already been procured and are under either constructed or in development, those are by 2028. Those first 5 that I mentioned, of course, are by the end of this year. And then following that, we may have some more come online. We'll have solar, additional batteries, and things like that to easily get to our 2030 goal.
Thank you. I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you. Well, that's good news. I want to bring us back to the now and this past weekend, which was very cold. And Nova Scotia Power, we all know, admitted that there was pressure on the grid. I know that we were helping Newfoundland, and Newfoundland was helping us. But I remember opening my email and getting that email saying, please conserve because of this, this, and this, and power outage may have to happen. We have technology available now to allow households to mitigate some of that pressure. Things like battery storage, using EVs as batteries if the power was to go out, or to save the power from your charged EV to give to the grid, smart thermostats, smart water heaters. There's all kinds of things we could be doing. And I think that when people heard that Nova Scotia Power was asking people to conserve energy, they were rightly worried and frightened because it was so darn cold. But also, kind of like flummoxed, like how is it possible that we're going to be charged 8% more on our power bills, and now we're actually not even sure if our grid is going to provide what we need. So the department could be doing more to ensure that these types of things that I've just mentioned could be in place, and also, of course, deep energy retrofits. So why are Nova Scotians currently expected to shoulder the majority of these costs on their own? And when will we see real incentives for things like this? I know we have Efficiency One. I know you will talk about Efficiency One, but it's not enough. So could you please talk about whether or not we will see this winter added programs, added money to the Efficiency One budget so that more people can start taking advantage of the technologies that will save the pressure or keep the pressure off the grid?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
I agree with you that there's lots of great technology there, and I know that you are well aware of the great work that Efficiency One does in terms of retrofitting homes. In addition to that, though, we have 2 of the 3 battery storage projects completed, and they've actually been used quite well from Nova Scotia Power. There's 1 more to be built, should be operational soon. That's not so much for individuals, but it's larger for the system. The intertie that's being built between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia as well will allow for a strengthening of consistent energy to the grid, and the procurement that is just begun by our independent system operator for fast-acting generation during those peaker power periods when we just need something quick to help us stabilize the grid. As of right now, I am not aware of any plans for additional funding for the program.
It's me. I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you for that answer. I'm disappointed to hear that there's not more coming, but we'll move on back to offshore wind for a second. So we have a target to license 5 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030. I'm wondering what the timeline looks like for Nova Scotians. So when will energy from Wind West come onto the grid? And will that energy be at? Well, you've already sort of answered this, but to confirm, that wind energy may not be coming directly to Nova Scotia unless we need that extra capacity. Can you confirm that? But the question is, when will we be up and running?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
Sure. So just for minor clarification, for this first process that's underway presently, the decision was taken to the target is up to 5 gigawatts in this first tranche. And we're estimating anywhere between 2031 and 2033. Obviously, sooner rather than later would be great, but we are realistically trying to, there's a lot of work ahead and working as quickly and efficiently as we can. And yes, to confirm, at this point, truthfully, we're not sure that by 2030 it would be needed anyway for our grid. We believe that we're well on the way with the Clean Power Plan. But as like onshore wind, like solar, as things grow, prices tend to come down. So we are very hopeful and optimistic that eventually the prices may come down enough. And if Nova Scotia's economic development kicks off in terms of attracting high energy users even more so, there'll be energy there in the 2030s that we'll be able to use as well.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Okay, so it's 2026. You're saying 2023-ish to be up and running, right? 31, 32, 33. So basically like 7 or 8 years. So CBC recently reported that it took Germany 23 years to get up and running from the first application to the first turbines generating electricity. So is it like how do we square that? Is it just because technology is better now, or how can we do it so quickly? Thank you.
Recognize Deputy Gatien.
Thank you for the question, actually. So for a couple of things. First of all, we are, because of our history with natural gas, we know our offshore fairly well at this point. We have a good, strong working relationship with the joint management with the federal government. We also are learning as much as we can from those jurisdictions that have come before us. This is a known technology. Technology, as you said, is growing and innovating. As the turbines become larger, we know the prices become a little bit more reasonable. So we are looking to learn as much as we can, as quickly as we can from other jurisdictions. So not learn from their mistakes as much as their successes.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc with about 9 minutes, 30 seconds.
9 minutes, okay. So with Wind West, or the offshore wind program, still years away, we have to make sure that we do things in a way that benefits Nova Scotia in the long term. Nova Scotians know and are watching in real time their power bills keep going up, in part because we're paying for Nova Scotia Power infrastructure. The infrastructure cost associated with the offshore wind is going to be in the billions. Who will be responsible for building the infrastructure, paying for the infrastructure, and will Nova Scotians have to pay for it through their power bills?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
Thank you. So the developers who are developing the offshore projects would pay for their turbines and their development, certainly. I would expect that the wind that they sell, they would include that in the price in terms of what they charge for the energy that they produce. We're working very closely with the federal government because we know in terms of the transmission, we need some help with that. That's, you know, in Nova Scotia Power is not part of the projects per se. At this, like, certainly we've enabled it so that if they wanted at some point to purchase the power that's produced, they can do that. That was important for the questions that you asked earlier. But you know, it'll be the users and whoever gets the offtake for the power that will help to pay for it, and the federal and provincial government are working together on what are the best, most cost-effective ways that we can do that. It is expensive, for sure.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Thank you. So going back to Europe for a second, in Denmark, there's a requirement that the public retains a minimum of a 20% equity stake in all the wind power developments. Then that gives the country a source of revenue to make life more affordable for their citizens. You know, and that's aside from the economic, you know, spin-offs from jobs, which we'll talk about in a second. Has the department recommended that the province similarly retain an equity stake in the offshore wind projects?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
The Wind West document talks about roughly a 4% in terms of, I can't remember the language we ended up landing on, but in terms of community benefits and other partnerships and funding to the province. It's not so much and verbalized as an equity stake, but there will be an economic benefit, like a royalty. Although it's not the same as a royalty, it's more like a levy, I think, because you produce electricity versus owning the wind. That's probably too technical. But yeah.
I recognize MLA LeBlanc.
I'm glad to hear that there'll be royalties. I think that it could be more, in my opinion. But it is a different question because royalties offer no ownership or control, whereas equity does. So, you know, given the high cost of the development, why wouldn't the government want to maintain some degree of control over that?
I recognize Deputy Gatien. Thank you. First time.
You're very welcome. So, at this point, we're still working through a lot of the details on how the project will get developed, how it will be funded, what the partnerships are. So those kinds of decisions have not been made anyway. But we do know from the public document that we put out there'll be at least a 4%.
Recognize MLA LeBlanc.
Before I turn it over to my esteemed colleague, I will just say that, yeah, I repeat that I think 4% is low. We want to make sure we're getting maximum benefit, and I'd love to see, you know, 5 to 7%, you know, but anyway, I guess that's discussion for another committee meeting or estimates or something. So
It's my turn.
I recognize MLA Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Chair. Earlier, you mentioned jobs. Approximately about 5,000, I think I heard correctly. I'm curious if these jobs are temporary or long-term, or how many do we think are going to be long-term? Like, how many Nova Scotians are actually going to work on this project?
I recognize MLA, Deputy Minister Gatien.
That is never happening. You know, thank you. So the 5,000 is an estimate, first of all, to be clear, and it's really through the construction development phase. And then what we're expecting is potentially 2,000 plus, like long-term operations. But there, you know, there's going to be, you know, marine operations, you know, ongoing maintenance. So in terms of going out and checking on the turbines and things in the offshore, there's the port jobs. There are the jobs in the supply chain. If I have workers in a community, you know, there might be housing, restaurants, you know, things like that. So, but we're estimating roughly about 2,000 long-term. Hopefully more, certainly.
I recognize MLA Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, jobs are going to be really important. As I understand it, about 80% of the jobs come from building the wind energy. From building wind energy come from manufacturing its component parts like blades and turbines and those big machine parts. Will these manufacturing jobs be created here for Nova Scotia? Or is the plan to purchase these towers and turbines from another province or country?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
To be honest, we're not at that stage. But what I will say to you is there are limited numbers of fabricators for these turbines. There's no one in Nova Scotia, I don't think. I think the closest might be Quebec for some of it. Is that true? David has an answer for you. But yes, certainly I think there'll be steel, aluminum, and where possible, use Nova Scotian companies, even in terms of like metal fab, in terms of putting things together and stuff.
I recognize Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chair. So we are exploring this right now. We're still at the early stages. We are focused on what Nova Scotia can do using its existing supply chain, its existing trained workforce, which has a lot of skills in the offshore space, not necessarily in offshore wind, but there's an opportunity to bring people over from offshore oil and gas and that kind of historic workforce here into this space. But we're also exploring what will be required so we can start that training program now to engage with universities, the community college, and private training to ensure that we have the right skills in our workforce at the time when they're needed. Certainly from a component manufacturing perspective, we are looking at what is required to develop that. But at present, as Deputy Gatien said, there are no manufacturers in Nova Scotia who produce this material. There is limited manufacturing capacity in Canada to produce some offshore components. A Quebec facility constructed some offshore blades. And there are some tower components built for the onshore sector in Quebec, but Canada as a whole has limited capacity in this space. But we see as this industry grows that the opportunities are to continue to build each of those elements, and some components will be easier to construct or fabricate locally or domestically rather than importing just because of the sheer scale of them, but it still requires a lot of important inputs. And so we're looking at how we can maximize that, and clearly that's aligned with the focus of the Canadian government around Buy Canada and the projects of national interest to try and maximize supply chains for Canadian steel, aluminum, those specific pieces.
Thank you. I recognize MLA Gallagher with minute 30.
Minute and 30. Thank you, Chair. I'm so glad you mentioned importing, actually, because the Carney government has recently imposed the 25% tariff on all imported wind towers as a part of a package of tariffs on steel-derived products. Do you anticipate the overall cost going up because of these tariffs?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
Yes. In short, we are concerned about the imposition of tariffs where there is not domestic manufacturing capability at the scale required to meet domestic demand. There's a huge demand for wind development in Quebec, less so in other jurisdictions, but Alberta has huge increases in wind planned. BC is exploring this further. Obviously, it's very important for Nova Scotia and New Brunswick as well. So we are quite concerned that the imposition of tariffs will negatively impact ratepayers in all these provinces with limited value created for the Canadian steel sector. So we continue to engage with the federal government on the impacts of this tariff and what exemptions or remissions could be possible to ensure that ratepayers in Nova Scotia don't bear an unfair burden of this cost. We would be happy to see more domestic manufacturing capability for these types of turbine components, but it's just not present today at the scale that we need to meet Nova Scotia's demand.
Thank you. We have 8 seconds.
8 seconds. Thank you so much.
I recognize the Honourable MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, everyone, for coming today on an important topic. I might leave environment alone today just because I have a limited time, but I want to stay specific to wind, and I'll just follow up with my colleague's question. Is the province actually advocating for exemptions for the tariffs to protect ratepayers? And just wondering how other provinces that are procuring renewable energy how they're handling the uncertainties with tariffs, with foreign exchanges, and the supply chain challenges. Is there anything that the province here is learning about that before we go with more procurement?
I recognize Deputy Gatien.
I'll start, and then if David has anything to add from other provinces. Yes, we are advocating for, as David said, either some kind of an exemption or remission. And in the Premier, our Minister, has also done that. We are hearing the same concern from our other colleagues, I think from Ontario East. I think they received an exemption, if I remember correctly, from Manitoba West. So we are asking for the same.
I recognize MLA Rankin.
Thanks. And I want to talk about the Green Choice Program because the last, the first round resulted in 2 in the end of the 6 projects. When I asked about that in the House, there was a commitment to go back to procurement. And my questions really are revolving around how to expedite some of the good work that is happening and maybe provide some other policy levers that could be looked at. But when is that next tender going out that was committed to? And when is the procurement expected to close and expected to have commercial operation date for the projects?
Recognize Deputy Gatien.
Thank you for asking that question, actually. So we're in the final stages of finalizing kind of the details for it, so I don't have the dates set up. We're hoping very, very soon. It was unfortunate. I think that what happened was the federal election happened. There was some concern around the future of the Canada Infrastructure Bank, so some of the proponents chose not to proceed. They had used some of that funding when they made their bid, and then unfortunately didn't want to proceed because of they weren't sure of its future depending on the outcome of the election. But
I recognize Honourable Emily Rankin.
Yeah, and thank you. And I just, in the interest of ratepayers and the facts now that we had the most affordable energy coming from wind and that Green Choice was launched back in 2019, many proponents are eager. And one of the things I think that was brought up in the last procurement was a lack of indexing. So now we have to go all the way back to the drawing board and start the procurement all over again. Is it possible that some of the factors in the 4 projects that aren't moving ahead was in fact that there was no opportunity to index, and how does the government plan to address the price cap and indexation for the next RFP?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
So as Deputy Gatien indicated, the procurement is not yet finalized, so the process and the structure of the contracts is still up for discussion. In the first procurement for rate-based procurement in 2021, there was no indexation at all. The price bid was the price expected to be delivered on for 25 years, which is a common standard across North America at this time. In Green Choice, we did include an adjustment for the 2 years following award. So proponents were able to take a portion of the consumer price index inflation for the 2 years after award, anticipating that that would get them close to or at construction. So they would have inflation as a factor in that process. We continue to explore what other opportunities there are to ensure that projects that are selected remain cost effective, but also deliver on that. So we are exploring that. We've certainly gotten a lot of feedback from proponents, and we're engaging with other procuring entities across Canada to better understand the best methods to get projects selected at that low cost and deliver the stability and affordability that onshore wind provides, but also to ensure that they have a commercial business that they can proceed with for 25 years.
I recognize Honourable Emily Rankin.
Yeah, I just want to ask the question on that same topic, though, that if you do you believe that if you introduce indexation that there's an opportunity to lower year 1 price for wind energy and therefore provide more immediate relief to ratepayers versus that fixed price contract? And I say that because it takes, we've lost time. It takes at least 4 to 5 years from tender approval to going forward, supply, ordering, and getting the project off the ground. Not 20-some years, but certainly takes some time. So I think we've lost a little ground. Would you admit that if you introduce that indexation, you could provide that relief as opposed to the fixed contract?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
It's a balance in terms of trying to identify the portfolio of assets that make the lowest cost sense for Nova Scotians. If you include indexing, we generally do see a decrease in year 1 prices. The net present value of the contract remains stable in this process. It does create some complexity in terms of contracting and trying to ensure that you're maintaining a balance where inflation may be high, but it's unaffecting, or it doesn't affect those projects. So they capture the value of inflation with no actual cost to them. And we see this where there may be high inflation on energy prices. That does not affect a turbine component, does not affect operations and maintenance. So we can see proponents that increase their rate of return at the expense of Nova Scotians without the commensurate benefit in as low a price as possible. So it's trying to balance these factors, and it's one of the things that we'll continue to take into consideration in the next procurement design.
Recognize Honourable MLA Rankin.
And another suggestion that I would propose is looking at the 25-year PPA term that's given that with technologies changes and advancing so quickly that my understanding is the technology can provide for 30 years plus. of a lifespan. So does the department expect options to extend PPA terms, power purchase agreement, for those that don't know, the contract to reduce energy costs for Nova Scotians to protect ratepayers in the long term?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
Similarly to your other question, we are continuing to explore what is the best option for ratepayers. While there may be a limit to a contract in 25 years, there's an obligation to renegotiate at the end of that exclusively with the offtake partner. At present, that would be Nova Scotia Power in the existing contracts. In the future, that would likely be the independent energy system operator that would negotiate subsequently. That creates an opportunity for a lower price in the long term, depending on the condition of the assets and their ability to produce. So it's not like the wind projects roll up and go home at the end of 25 years. In many cases, we've seen existing projects seek extensions before their contract is over to ensure that they can maintain the value of that asset into the future for their own profit, but also at a really aggressive price for ratepayers.
I recognize Honourable MLA Rankin, 245.
Okay. Under the wire. Also, to benefit ratepayers, what's the province doing with the federal government to ensure that the Canada Infrastructure Bank financing is available, just as it was for the intertie, as it was for past procurement, and for Nova Scotia Power's battery project? What kind of advocacy is happening now, and will there be eligibility for that to protect ratepayers?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
We've had really positive engagement with the Canada Infrastructure Bank over the last 5 or 6 years, basically since their founding, to see how they can best benefit ratepayers in Nova Scotia. Each of these processes has had a slightly different approach from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We are advocating for what makes the most sense for ratepayers, and we have done some work to support that through our partnership. Our arrangement for the intertie is particularly unique and required government intervention to enable that partnership between Canada Infrastructure Bank and Nova Scotia Power as an equity owner, as opposed to simply a senior or subordinate debtor. So we will continue to explore what works best. It also depends on what the proponents want. Not all proponents necessarily agree that the Canada Infrastructure Bank provides value in the long term. We have seen most take it up at present, but the margins are relatively small. We continue to work to ensure that the CIB meets its mandate, which is helping to reduce the cost of these assets for Nova Scotians on the decarbonization process. We'll continue to work with them as this next round of procurement starts, and with offshore wind as well.
Recognize Honourable MLA Rankin.
And with the MOU between Alberta and the federal government for clean electricity exemptions, is Nova Scotia seeking those similar exemptions, and how does that impact wind development in the province?
Recognize Mr. Miller with 55 seconds.
So at this time, it's an easy answer in 55 seconds. At this time, we believe that the Clean Power Plan puts us on track to meet all of the obligations under the clean electricity regulations that were produced by the federal government. We remain concerned about the stringency of some of these targets without any commensurate benefit to greenhouse gas emissions. So we are on track to having a 90% plus reduction in electricity sector emissions without the federal government imposing onerous requirements. So we don't see substantive value there, but we have a plan that will meet those targets by minimizing our use of fossil fuels and aggressively building out wind for this period of time. And we'll continue to plan with that in mind. But we will also monitor the situation with Alberta and how that changes the overall federal approach to regulation of greenhouse gas emissions with respect to the electricity system.
Sorry. Order. We'll now move to the PC questioning. MLA McCrory, please.
Thank you. Deputy Gatien, can you give us an update on the progress being made on the Clean Power Plan, please?
Deputy Gatien, please.
Sure, happy to do that, especially since we've already talked about it so much. But I've already mentioned the wind that's well underway. So by the end of those 9 projects, that'll be 850 more megawatts, gets us that much closer to our 1,000. And then we have quite a bit of solar. The Clean Power Plan targets 100 megawatts of solar generation, as well as new solar of 200 megawatts. So we have introduced a community solar program that has been quite successful. There's still, it's still early days, but a number of larger organizations. So if you think of a nonprofit organization developing a solar farm, and then people can get subscriptions to it to benefit. So people in apartments, lower income houses, things like that can also benefit from solar. They can't put it on their own roofs, obviously, but they still get the benefit. We're about halfway on our battery goal, so the 300 megawatts of batteries with the 3 projects that Nova Scotia Power has developed. And we are looking forward to the independent system operator doing a procurement for the remaining 150, if not more, depending on where we're at that point. And then in terms of fast-acting generation, there's also already some communication that's happening, engagement for 2 projects in the Pictou County area. And those are the peakers. This will come on when we need them, and they can turn on pretty quickly. It's not like booting up a coal plant that can take you a little bit of time. We are well underway in terms of the partnership with Nova Scotia Power and New Brunswick Power in building the intertie. And we're also always looking at load management in terms of how do we work to manage the demand response and efficiency for the coal power plant. We expect we'll probably be in the high 70s by 2028, 78% maybe, with just a little bit more to go. So,
I recognize MLA McQuarrie.
Thank you. Deputy Gatien, you mentioned wind and solar and batteries. There's also, we have hydro and natural gas rounds out the clean power plan. We have a mix there. Can you describe how we arrived at the different amounts of those energies, in particular the amount of wind that we've decided to use?
Recognize Deputy Gatien.
I'll probably have to lean on my expert next to me a little bit, but I think, first of all, as we've said, we already have the existing renewables. I'm looking at a picture, hopefully you've all seen it. About 30% of the wind hydro biomass that already existed before this started. And then we have the Maritime Link, which was another 10% at least. And then we estimate wind is probably, as we've said over and over again, I think, onshore wind, probably our cheapest fuel source. And we have such high capacity in terms of wind, and it's reliable wind. But then you need to shore that up and for the times when the wind doesn't blow. And so the battery project and fast peaking gas. And so it was really what is doable, what's achievable. And then solar has been incredibly popular in the province. There was a lot of uptake in terms of households who put solar on their roofs. Some commercial entities who put solar on their buildings, and now with community solar, we're seeing some strong uptake. So it just became how can this magic work? If all of a sudden solar ended up being more, then maybe a little less wind, right? We'd play around with it, but those are pretty consistent factors. I don't know if you have anything.
I recognize Mr. Miller.
So the process for kind of planning a power system of the future is usually around cost optimization while maintaining compliance with any environmental targets. And that's the process that Nova Scotia Power went through with their integrated resource plan, and that the IESO is now going through with its own integrated resource plan. We use some of that material and some of our own insights to see what was most appropriate. And every time a model was run, it said, buy as much wind as you can possibly integrate onto your system. So what we see in the Clean Power Plan is reaching what I would say is close to the technical limit at today's technology level to integrate such a variable resource. We see lots of progress elsewhere, so we hope to kind of meet that same target here. But Ireland is an example where they're integrating a comparable amount of wind and they're pushing their systems to the max. Australia has a different resource, obviously, with solar, but they're achieving even higher levels of penetration of what's called a variable renewable. So we see this as the plan for today. As Deputy Gatien said, there's a lot of flexibility. We have not nailed down that everything must happen this way. It is what is the best resource that we can buy today at the best cost to meet our long-term power system needs. And those are changing. We saw a new peak set in 2023, and then again just this weekend. So we need to be constantly aware of how we meet that peak as a critical part so that we don't have concerns around the availability of energy during those periods, but also how do we minimize the cost overall. And so as much wind as we can buy and put on the system at any given hour is probably the constraint that drove this point of the Clean Power Plan.
Recognize MLA Macquarie.
So several times you've said that wind is the cheapest form of energy that we can buy in Nova Scotia. There's a perception that that's not the case. Was wind a lot more expensive in the past, and what happened to, what improvements were made to make it more cost effective?
Recognize Mr. Miller.
So certainly previously wind was more expensive. We had some really great deployments of kind of grid scale wind in the 2010 period, I think around like Pupnico Point and a couple other places. And those were quite cost effective, but it was limited and prices increased in that space. So when we got into the community feed-in tariff process, wind was priced at about $130 a megawatt hour. The procurement that was concluded in 2022, trying to get my years straight here, was at $53 a megawatt hour. So the price was more than halved in less than 10 years through the work. And part of that is the turbines have gotten bigger. So the smallest turbines that we're seeing deployed now are 4.5 megawatts. If you go back to 2015, they were 2 or 2.3. If you go back further, they were 1.6 megawatts. So we've gone up almost a scale of 4 to the point today. So that means less sites that you need to permit, less impact, less roads, less transmission lines. All of those pieces make it cheaper to deploy. And the industry has gotten much better as well. The turbine technology, the power electronics, the ability to capture lower speed winds has also improved over this period of time. And so we see this learning curve in a lot of other sectors, in batteries where the price comes down, and solar and wind. So we are buying into wind in a big way now that the price is relatively low compared to where it was. Everyone is doing the same. You go to jurisdictions where natural gas is plentiful, like Alberta and Texas, and they are the fastest deployers of wind in North America because it is cost effective for their systems. So it is about scale of deployment and how many are being deployed globally that help drive that price down. It is always challenged, of course, by the price of commodities going in. There's a lot of steel in a turbine, so that does move up and down, which is why our procurement for Green Choice was more expensive than for rate-based procurement only a few years before. But overall, that inflation is relatively small compared to the overall inflation in the economy.
Recognize MLA Macquarie.
Thank you. Great answer. With wind power being so cheap, why are other forms of energy, such as natural gas, necessary to make the wind power possible?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
The power system planning is about meeting the needs in all circumstances. So, and we saw this less here, although we don't have all the data to date because it's still very much a live issue. But I saw that over the weekend in those cold snaps in Texas and in Ontario, where it was very cold, wind did not perform very well during some of that time. And that's not unexpected. Sometimes turbines can't perform when there's too much ice or the conditions are too cold. We are ensuring that all of our turbines have the cold weather package, so they'll operate in those conditions. But that's not always true for Texas for a whole variety of good reasons, I think. But those systems have to be designed to meet that peak, whatever it comes from. So you almost need to have a whole set of renewables and a whole set of flexible generators. And today, the most cost-effective version of that is a fossil fuel-based generator. And what we see in the Clean Power Plan is these fast-acting natural gas units that can turn on and be up to full power in 10 minutes. It would take a coal plant probably 24 hours to achieve that. And they can turn down just as fast, unlike a coal plant. So you can turn them on to meet how wind is changing. So you need resources to meet whatever that demand is. People are turning on their heat regardless of whether it's windy. So we need to make sure that the system is planned with all of that in mind. And that's where the Clean Power Plan is about that portfolio of assets as opposed to just a single thing. And we are in a unique position in Nova Scotia, or relatively unique, which is why I would think of us more like Ireland than I would like some of our neighbors, where we have limited natural gas connections, limited transmission interconnections, even to large jurisdictions, but a lot of wind. So it's trying to maximize that resource, but always be available with fossil fuels in this case, or biomass, or our limited hydro to meet that major demand that happens on those cold days when maybe it's not very windy.
Recognize MLA Macquarie.
Thanks. One more question, I'll let you off the hook. So Nova Scotia does not currently produce natural gas at all. We bring in natural gas over the border from the U.S. could locally sourced natural gas come at a lower cost and help energy price stability?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
The short answer is yes. The margin or the difference in cost between locally produced gas and gas that is imported, it's really hard to estimate. We both buy gas in Nova Scotia, so Eastward Energy for natural gas heating and industrial use, or Nova Scotia Power to generate electricity. They contract in advance for some of it, and they pay for transportation, and they buy some on the what's called spot market. So locally produced natural gas would not have some of those transportation costs. And today we're buying gas from as far away as Alberta, and we're paying to move it across that pipeline infrastructure, or from Ontario at the Dawn hub. So there's definitely a transportation cost differential. There's a potential for some commodity cost difference just because we can maybe make those contracts with a local supplier in a different way than when we would be trying to contract with a supplier in Alberta or Ontario generally. So it's hard to estimate, but it is likely that it would achieve some difference in cost.
No, I recognize MLA McGilvery, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe this is for Deputy Gatien. How does the new independent energy system operator figure into planning new generation projects moving forward? And how can this be a benefit to ratepayers?
Recognize Deputy Gatien.
Sure. First and foremost, they're a nonprofit, so there's no rate of return on the work that they do. They will lead the system planning as well as any procurements that we do. Obviously, it will be cost effectiveness will always be a factor for them, for sure, when they do that work. They will encourage additional competitiveness, so we will be getting the best price for the generation and the best system planning for the system. And basically, the functions already happened. They were within Nova Scotia Power, and we just kind of pulled those functions out and setting up. They're still in a phased process at this point. Full operations will be another year, I think, about another year. But I mean, it's just competition, cost effectiveness, and they operate as a nonprofit, so there's no kind of profit in it for them.
Recognize MLA McGilvery.
Thank you. Just going to ask a question about batteries. So the Clean Power Plan also includes technologies like batteries. What benefit can batteries bring for ratepayers, be that reliability or affordability, and what progress is being made?
Deputy Gatien, please.
Sure. So batteries are sort of that backup power that David was talking about earlier in terms of the fast-acting gas. They also perform the same function. I think right now they're 4 to 8 hour capacities, depending on the type of battery. And you know, we certainly need them to shore up the grid for sure. In terms of progress, we have already developed a project with Nova Scotia Power. They have 2 of the 3 up and running. Anecdotally, they've already shared with me, prior to this weekend even, that there were a number of times when during those peak periods in the morning and in the evening, when the batteries were of significant help in terms of managing just the load on the grid. So we, as the technology improves, you know, I'd love to see even a longer capacity, of course, with the batteries, but our plan is at least another 150 megawatts. There'll be a procurement that independent system operator I mentioned will run. Their first procurement is the fast-acting generation, because we see that as the most acute need to have that in place, but certainly battery storage will be quickly coming after that.
Recognize MLA McGilvery, please.
Okay, I'll just ask about a wind now. Exactly how much new wind is planned for a grid, and where are these projects situated? I think you touched on this, but.
Scott. I recognize Mr. Miller.
So of the projects that have already received a contract for production, they are geographically diverse, although we see a concentration along the kind of the Cobequid Highlands. So that is an area that has strong transmission infrastructure and great wind. It's a windy spot. I think everyone is probably familiar with how much wind is there. So that's what drives this, is the proximity to good transmission and then a good wind resource. But we've also seen a project in Wedgeport outside of Yarmouth. We see one in the Mersey project. And I always get confused about which community it's in, but it's near Liverpool area. And then we have projects in Windsor and along the Copperwood Highlands at present. But we see opportunities for other locations as well. Much of Nova Scotia is quite windy. Cape Breton certainly has a really strong wind resource, and it has had limited development for a variety of technical reasons to date. But it's possible that in the future we'll see more diverse locations as the access to the grid becomes one of the critical factors. And as the grid changes, as we retire coal, that space on the transmission system can become available for new generation, and that could be wind. So to date, that wind resource, as I said, those projects around Antigonish and around Colchester-Cumberland area are probably the largest in the province.
I recognize MLA McGilvery.
Okay, thank you for that. I know in my community, there's been some wind turbines components moved through the community, and they've had to do a lot of safety work around that. So I'm just wondering, what efforts are in place to ensure that the materials required for these projects are getting from our ports to the project site safely?
Mr. Miller.
This has been a good success story, I think. We have certainly challenged our colleagues at the Department of Public Works. I don't think that we have seen such heavy or large equipment moved on our roads in such numbers ever, and that's only going to be more so this year. It's taken a lot of collaboration between the department and Public Works, but mostly between the contractors who are delivering the turbines. So these are very heavy components. In some cases, the total turbine weight is in the hundreds of tons. And the size of the turbines is in some ways constrained by the size of the overpasses that they have to get through. So turbine manufacturers try and find that sweet spot of how big can we build it and still get it on a normal road. We are able to take the largest turbines in the world onshore effectively, but our roads have limited capacity. So we've seen a lot of work to try and find new pathways and routes. So some development at the port in Mulgrave enabled great transportation for a lot of those projects along the Copperwood Highlands. So whether that's the Goose Harbor Lake project, Weaver's Mountain, or Higgins Mountain, they have a very direct access route from the port of Mulgrave. So very minor improvements were needed there. I think a small bridge, and it enabled much easier kind of development. We did see some challenges. There were some components that had some mishaps en route, but I think everyone is learning how these new pieces can be moved more safely. But it's a critical part of our planning, and it's a part that we are working with Public Works and with the developers to ensure they're aware of those restrictions before they bid, and that they understand what they can do and can't do in terms of transportation in Nova Scotia. There will be a lot of work this year to improve on that, and hopefully that will make it even easier going forward.
We're going to move on to MLA Balby.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, folks, today for being here and answering this ever-ending list of questions. Can you explain how your respective departments can ensure that these upcoming projects are engaging with local communities?
Deputy Gatien, please.
Okay. In terms of part of the when we approve the projects, a part of the procurement process, they have to they don't give it to us. The procurement administrator evaluates the project on a number of variables. One of them, of course, is community engagement. So their plan for community engagement and how they've engaged the community, how they've explained it to the community, is a significant factor in terms of how they're scored just in the procurement process. As a department, we've also done a number of engagement sessions across the province on clean energy writ large, just in terms of what we're doing and what the value is. We've had open houses, we've done pop-ups at different community events, because one thing we learned in the open house is people don't necessarily want to come out to see us to talk about clean energy, but if we're in your face at the home show, you might be really interested in our booth, right? So we'll talk to whoever will ask us to talk. So we're trying to get the message out as well as a department to help and understand people. It's really important that it becomes their project and they see the benefit. Certainly proponents, work closely with the local municipalities as well to kind of help articulate and inform what is the benefit to this community. Sometimes it's a dollar amount, sometimes it's a direct dollar amount, sometimes it's a contribution to different kinds of things, school, what have you.
I recognize Deputy MacEachern.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to add to this as well. So all of the wind projects and most industrial projects are required to go through our environmental assessment process, and that's their first key kind of approval that they need to establish themselves as a project and a business. And so we have expectations and requirements of them as they file for their environmental assessment approval. So companies are expected to engage with the community and engage with Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia in advance of filing, and that's something that we look for as part of their application, that they've done those engagement. And so often you'll see that there's been engagement assessments, and they're provide engagement open houses and that sort of thing, and they're providing that information to us as part of their application process. And then once they do file with us, we have a 40-day time frame within our 50-day process, where the public can write to us and give us information, their concerns, their perspective. As well, we do a consultation with the Mi'kmaq community. So there's a 40-day period, and it's in the paper, it's well publicized, so there's lots of opportunity. All of the public information that comes in goes on our website, so anyone can take a look and see. And all of that information goes to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and it informs the decision that's made whether to approve the application or whether to send it back to conditions. And just one last point, oftentimes in our terms and conditions of approval, there'll be a requirement for the proponent to set up a community liaison committee, and that's to be up and running while the project is ongoing, so the community can have engagement all along the way. Thank you.
Recognize MLA Bowlby.
I've got a friend that he used to be in the wind turbine business and helped put up the big 55 units in Prince Edward Island almost 20 years ago. So while it was ongoing, I was over and I saw some earlier versions and then the current. But what we're at now is, what you mentioned, is larger. The technology has improved. What is it that's making them more cost effective?
Mr. Miller, please.
A large part of it is simply increasing the scale. So the larger blades capture more wind area. So you have a larger area of the swept, and so wind speeds in that whole kind of in the lower range and getting quite high can be captured by these turbines. And so that's the big part that has driven the cost down, is improvements in that. I think we've also seen improvements in their ability to react to wind conditions and to adjust their output to make greater value to the grid. And this is a part that we are seeing become more and more important as we develop this space, is to ensure that projects are not just generating energy. Our electricity system is not just about energy. It's about a whole variety of services. You have to keep the voltage perfect. You have to keep the frequency perfect. You have to meet that capacity. And turbines today are able to respond to those conditions in real time to ensure that the grid is getting all the energy it needs, but also that it's stable. So I think what we see is these turbines create value for the grid, and they create value for the owners by being able to provide those services as well. I think that as well, our ability to maintain winter operations through de-icing equipment and better de-icing equipment today than was available in the past, and just the production costs. So people have become more efficient. If you're building fewer blades to capture the same wind is probably that big driver. We've also seen an explosion in global manufacturing. A lot of it, there's a lot happening in China, which is helping to drive the price down, and some components do come from China today. But European manufacturers have certainly had to keep up with that price change and try and keep those prices low by just growing the production process, growing the factory size. So all of those together have led to where we're at today.
MLA Bowlby with 4 minutes, 30 seconds.
This will be my last one. I know we have just finished up some of the early work on our offshore wind project. Can you share any updates about how that's going?
Deputy Gatien, please.
Sure. So there was a call for information process, and then a process where they kind of designated potential bidders. and that opened October 16th, closed January 13th. I'm not privy to the results of that. The Canada Nova Scotia Offshore Energy Regulator manages that process for us. It's all highly confidential. I do know from a department we had lots of interest, certainly even before they opened up their call for information and pre-qualification period of time. Lots of developers coming. You know, I certainly won't be a surprise to anyone. It certainly increased following some decisions that were taken south of the border as well. But there was a lot of activity even before that in terms of people being interested and reaching out to us for information. So that call for that process completed January 13th. It is now with the regulator. They're going through that information, and it will help them to inform a recommendation to the two ministers. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a joint management between the federal government and the province. So the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources Canada, and of course our Minister of Energy in the province, will get a recommendation from the regulator saying this is what we think the call for bid should look like. You know, this is when we think you should run it, and then the two ministers will review it. I think they have 60 days with a possible extension of another 30 should they need the time. And then they'll open up a call for bids. Hopefully we won't need the extension. Hopefully it'll be a quick process, and then we'll go through the call for bids and hopefully get lots of interest. Thank you.
I recognize MLA Van Exen with 2 minutes, 20 seconds
Okay, great.
in this round.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you all for being here. So I think I maybe have time for one question. So I'll start with a question around the lift. So can you tell us more about the new large industrial file team and why it was created, what it does, and how it benefits Nova Scotians?
Deputy MacEachern, please.
Yes, so thanks very much. That new team's in Department of Environment and Climate Change, and I have the executive director responsible for the team right here with me, Adrian Fuller, so I'll just turn it over to him to answer those questions.
Recognize Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I really love talking about the LIFT team. It's been in existence now for about a year, and so far it's been a very successful team. We wanted to create that team, so we have pulled some specialized support, technical support, engineers, hydros, inspectors, so they cover the whole breadth of what our involvement may be with a client coming in, but it is to manage those large, complex files that we have in this province, and also all our mining files. So we've seen benefits of that in this past year, so that's been fantastic. It provides great opportunity for our big approval holders because they're responsible for tire manufacturing, for power generation, to deal with a consistent team, and so that we're consistent and fair right across the province. So there's all sorts of benefits that come from that team. And as I mentioned before, we have a dedicated manager, we have engineers in that team, we have hydrogeologists in that team, we have senior inspectors in that team, so they're the ones that are going out and inspecting these sites, and they're building their knowledge across all of those big approvals. That it just makes the interaction much easier, much more efficient. It's quicker for our clients to get the information they need. And most importantly, it helps us be proactive with those clients and provide them the right information, the guidance, the information they need to be successful in this province. So every effort that we can make to make that better, it's been huge. So it's been a good year so far.
Order. Sorry. Time has expired on that round of questioning. We're going to move to the second round of questioning with which will have 16 minutes for the PCs, 8 minutes for the NDP, and 8 minutes for the Liberals. And I will start with MLA Gallagher, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Mr. Fuller. When we last left off, we were talking about tariffs, and I just have another follow-up question to the tariffs. As I understand it, that tariff that we were speaking about, the 25% on steel products, does not apply to energy projects west of the Ontario-Manitoba border. And so I'm curious how or what the response of the energy or What response has the energy minister received when advocating for such an exemption for here in Nova Scotia?
Deputy Gatien, please.
The information that we have to date, we don't have anything in writing at this point, but the information that we have to date is that there is an opportunity for us to look at a process, possibly a remission process, but we're still waiting for what that might look like. Yeah.
Recognize MLA Gallagher, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the initial target, changing, the initial target of 5 gigawatts will result in more energy than our province of Nova Scotia will need. So we're hoping to export it to other markets. We've spoken about Quebec, maybe New England, maybe even Europe. But all of those export projects will require the creation of a subsea cable transmission lines. And we haven't heard a lot of details about it. And I'm just curious, when does the department expect to make a decision where the subsea transmission lines will be built? I'm learning so much.
I recognize Mr. Miller.
So the final location will mostly depend on the market that's buying the energy. So that will be the critical part. Or market. So there are opportunities. We see huge demand for electricity continuing to grow. Challenges in the U.S. market notwithstanding, there was still a demand that exceeded the kind of ability to supply in those markets. So however things change in the United States, we still see opportunities there. Quebec, Ontario, all have growing economies that require more electricity. We see that very clearly. And it helps that our wind is geographically diverse from there. So when it's not windy there, it may be windy here. So there's great value that's created. In terms of where that cable would go, we are planning to undertake some work in the near term to better identify the kind of environmental and route constraints. We've been speaking with cable manufacturers, with companies that install these cables, that want to own these cables. There's a surprising amount of interest, I would say, in this. What we are learning is that there are some conditions that are unsuitable, but we don't think that those are going to be a major constraint here. So we'll be able to avoid most of the environmentally sensitive areas, we think, but we want to go and do the field work to actually understand. And we think that this is one of the ways that government can help to de-risk the process, is by helping to identify where these can go and start that environmental kind of characterization process in advance. We aren't talking about going forward and mapping the whole seabed and doing all the environmental assessment, but at least getting some of that initial material to help de-risk the project, because this is a very substantial component and a very expensive component.
I recognize MLA Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I had multiple questions in one big question there. Not a lot of clarity on where the subsea transmission lines are going to go, and I'm wondering if maybe the uncertainty for companies will negatively impact the call for bids that are going out this year.
Mr. Miller, please.
I think that many of these companies are sophisticated and understand that not all pieces will be solidified today. And the call for bids process, or the subsea license process, is about the wind generation. It's less about the transmission location necessarily. So the license for offshore wind production is different than the approvals and requirements for a transmission cable. Now, I want to be clear that there's two kinds of transmission involved in a wind project. You can imagine that there's the cables between each turbine to a substation, and then from a substation at sea, potentially, to a substation on land. And that's kind of I would think of as the collector system. And then there's the export cable, which would deliver all that packaged power to market. So the wind projects will be responsible for only a portion of that, and we see there to be in two different proponents, a transmission proponent and a wind proponent. They obviously will need to be coordinated, and that's the part that we are working toward today. So I think that the critical factors for getting good bids in the offshore is identifying the market opportunities that are there, and we're taking efforts today to help characterize those markets better, and then to help identify where transmission can go, and working with transmission providers to demonstrate that there are interested parties to construct that transmission, that it can be done on the same timeline as the development of wind, so that there's not a disconnect between those two periods, and ensure that that delivery to market is there. In many ways, I think the wind developers are somewhat agnostic to the transmission. As long as they know where they need to bring their collector system, that's the end of their responsibility. And then the transmission provider is the one that has all those subsequent obligations to get it to the market.
Emily LeBlanc.
I mean, just on that, I have other questions, but like, do we need to have some guarantee of market before we start building the generation? I mean, it seems kind of backward to be building all of this and then hope that we'll get a buyer for it.
Mr. Miller, please, with 2 minutes.
So agreed. No one will start the construction of $100 million turbines without a market to sell it to. But we are not at the stage where people are making those final investment decisions, where we have years before that occurs. That is why we are taking active steps today to try and help clarify what the market opportunity is and help to facilitate those market transactions. So we are not expecting anyone to bid and build a turbine without that, but people will bid in order to secure the rights to develop that land resource even before they know the final offtake. So there are several steps in between, and that first stage, which we are looking at today, is about securing the right to build. It's not making a decision to invest $30 or $40 billion. It's the starting step. So we will work closely with those developers between now and that final investment decision.
Emily LeBlanc, 1 minute 8 seconds, please.
Okay, quickly, Deputy Gatien, we had the open call for information and pre-qualification in October, and both of those calls closed 2 weeks ago. I'm wondering if you can share any results in terms of feedback on the areas considered, possible evaluation criteria for bids, terms and conditions, and will there be a summary that will be publicly released?
Recognize Deputy Gatien.
I cannot release that information. It's still confidential with the regulator. I don't know it. They hold it. I do believe on their website they have posted some questions that they've received, information questions and things. If you check their website for that, and then but when they send a recommendation letter and decisions and things, a lot of their information by that point becomes public anyway. So they're still deliberating and reviewing the information.
12 seconds. So that ends the time allotted to the NDP. We'll move to Emily Rankin. 8 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots on offshore wind, but I don't have enough time, so I'm going to focus still on onshore. Maybe we'll have a long host session where we can get into the offshore stuff. But the construction of 3 Everwind wind farms in Colchester, West Hanson, Halifax should be underway, my understanding, by the end of March. So does Everwind have their signed power purchase agreements with Nova Scotia Power for the projects covered under the prescribed regulations?
Recognize Mr. Miller.
No, those power purchase agreements have not yet been issued by the minister.
Recognize Emily Rankin.
Thank you. The maximum PPA prices in prescribed generation facilities, I looked at them and they are quite aggressive. So I'm just wondering if Everwind is able to, do they need CIB financing in order to meet that price? And if they do secure CIB financing, does that mean that the other wind projects potentially might not be able to in Nova Scotia?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
I don't think it's my place to comment on Everwind's proposed financial mechanisms. I think that we are comfortable that the Canada Infrastructure Bank was recapitalized with an additional $10 billion of capital in the most recent budget process, that there's significant capital available for deployment of all wind in Nova Scotia. So it's not a concern for us at this time, but I can't comment on whether or not the CIB is important to Everwind's project.
Recognize Emily Rankin.
Okay, and a key question has always been for me is if they are not able to build the green hydrogen infrastructure, the electrolyzer, will they still be able to build the wind capacity? And I think it's an important question relative to the comments about having lots of wind capacity relative to the comments of having, the cheapest form of energy. It's not infinite. We only have so much land space for wind projects at that competitive price. So that's my key question. If they don't build that green hydrogen facility, can they still go ahead with their prescribed regulations and build wind?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
So the prescribed project regulations are focused on that, I would say, linked relationship between the power purchase agreement and a sale agreement to supply, in their case, the hydrogen production facility. So it is always possible for Everwind to pivot or adjust course to produce wind for domestic use and to compete that into the upcoming Green Choice Program procurement. There is nothing that prevents them. Being a prescribed project does not constrain their economic opportunities, however they choose to use them. But we're quite confident that just in addition to the existing projects that have been contracted, there's, I think, about almost 600 megawatts of additional wind that we're aware of that has already received environmental assessment approval. And based on scans from department staff, we think that there's almost another 900 beyond that, not including any of the green hydrogen projects. So we are quite comfortable that there is a lot of onshore wind potential across Nova Scotia, a variety of jurisdictions, a variety of proponents that could deliver all the energy that we need to meet our targets without Everwind being involved. But if they choose to participate in a competitive process, then we would be happy to take the lowest price resource if that happens to be theirs.
Recognize MLA Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if Everwind is allowed to proceed, does that mean that the roughly 800 megawatts of the total of the 1,400 megawatts of wind from the Nova Scotia Power 10-year system outlook, or put another way, if you do quick math, it's about a value of $2.4 billion if you look at the value of the projects at $3 million per megawatt, would that be sourced without a competitive procurement process?
I recognize Mr. Miller.
I'm not sure I got the exact question, but I don't believe that Nova Scotia Power's 10-year system outlook accounts for Everwind, Everwind's production and load as part of that 10-year system outlook, but I would have to confirm to be sure. But I'm also not sure that was exactly the question you posed.
MLA Rankin?
Yeah, just to clarify, so Nova Scotia Power's outlook said there's about 1,400 megawatts of capacity space. Does Everwind not take up 800 of that 1,400, or are you saying that we can actually absorb 2,200 megawatts?
Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So I think that Nova Scotia Power's 10-year system outlook is about how much wind is expected to meet the growth in demand. If more demand appears, then the system can adjust to incorporate that demand as well. So if our peak continues to grow and our energy use continues to increase, the 10-year system outlook will continue to grow those numbers, so we will be able to integrate more wind and other resources to meet that demand. Everwind, in part because of the potential flexibility of hydrogen and ammonia production, doesn't have as much of an impact on the grid as some other users because they can vary their output based on the wind conditions as opposed to requiring, 24-hour steady-state power. So they are not as significant a constraint on managing wind as some other kind of generation or demand users would be. So there's more flexibility. But I think the 10-year system outlook is a future state kind of forecast. And as that forecast evolves over time, I think we would see those numbers increase. But I don't think that Everwind has an impact on those.
MLA Rankin?
So just for certainty, there's no requirement for ratepayers or Nova Scotia Power to purchase the energy that could be produced by Everwind, given that they have no defined amount of load themselves, unless they build the electrolyzer. So what you're seemingly saying is that there won't be grid capacity allocated for Everwind.
Mr. Miller?
Everwind does have several wind projects in the transmission system interconnection queue. So those projects have been studied as part of how the transmission system needs to change to accommodate new users. If those projects do not proceed, they can eventually be removed from that queue, or if they participate in procurement, then they maintain their queue position to interconnect. But that process is managed at present by Nova Scotia Power transitioning to the IESO. Actually, I apologize, it may have already transitioned to the IESO. I'm not perfectly clear on that exact point. But at present, there is no obligation for Nova Scotia Power to purchase the energy from Everwind's projects.
MLA Rankin, 1 minute.
So there will be no untendered energy flowing through Everwind projects to the grid. They'll have to go through a competitive process, just for clarity.
Mr. Miller?
That is the present structure, that there is a process where we are engaged in negotiation with Everwind about the production and sale of energy for their hydrogen projects, and we're continuing to explore the next round of procurement through Green Choice.
Mr. Rankin, MLA Rankin, 38.
Okay, no, I'm fair. That's good. Yeah.
Thank you. So we will move to PC's time, and MLA Van Exen, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to Mr. Fuller and see if you had any more to add about your LIFT team. We got cut off on our time, but I think we left off with your team has been in place for about a year. I think that's where we were. Do you have anything else to add? Thank you.
Mr. Fuller.
Yep, sorry about that. I'm just anxious to speak, so.
Really?
No, I pretty well said most of it. I also like to say that the LIFT team works very closely with our business relationship managers or within the Inspection, Compliance, and Enforcement Division. And these are real key connections between our EA folks, between my folks and my team, and with any business wants to come into the province with a large complex project. I'd also like to add that I think this quote sums it up, and it's from the federal government. It's from Senator Gatien, and I'd like to read it just quickly because I think it's a good summary. It says, "The LIFT initiative shows what's possible when regulators embrace innovation. It creates clearer, more responsive, and easier to navigate processes that open the door to globally competitive opportunities, all while upholding our responsibility to protect citizens, the environment, and the economy." So. I hate to use other people's words, but I thought it's nice to see that recognition, but I think it sums up pretty well what the goal of the LIFT team was. So thank you for giving me more time to talk about LIFT. Appreciate it.
I recognize MLA Van Exen.
Okay, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm hoping to go back to talking about the battery storage. So a bit of a shift here in particular. So I know that there's 2 of the 3 battery sites that they're up and running. The third site is located in White Rock, if I understand correctly, and I was wondering if you could provide an update of where we're at this time.
Recognize Mr. Miller.
I don't know a whole lot of detail on this point, but we certainly expect it to be in service quite soon. Nova Scotia Power was constructing all of the facilities in many ways in parallel. Battery projects are not the most complex engineering work actually in installation, not to diminish the great work of the contractor for Nova Scotia Power, but a lot of the complexity is in the production of the battery and the control systems which are then installed here. But I think that we expect the third battery project to be online within a couple months.
MLA Van Exen.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump into a different topic now. So if somebody does have a concern or a question about the wind farms, we're back to wind farms here, and feels that they're offside with the Environmental Act, who would they call?
Deputy MacEachern.
Thanks very much. So they should call the local office of the Department of Environment and Climate Change. And again, that's Mr. Fuller's group. There's 10 offices all across the province, and anyone can call, and we'll have someone look into it.
MLA Van Exen.
And can you tell us more about how the inspection, compliance, and enforcement process does work?
Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. I guess as far as following up on complaints, the process, as the deputy mentioned, is anyone can make raise a concern or complaint to any one of our offices across the province. We have an office in Yarmouth, Kempville, Bridgewater, Bedford, Amherst, Truro, and Pictou, Antigonish, Port Hawkesbury, and Sydney. So we got coverage right across the province. There's pretty easy access through email, through phoning, and also we have an emergency line that people can call after hours. So we do provide coverage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is a really important piece because we like to get that information when it's happening, and so we can respond very quickly. So that's important as well. I guess the first step once a complaint is received is that staff would determine if a response is immediate or if there can be follow-up in a couple days or whatever is appropriate. And I guess how that is made, sometimes you may get a complaint, some of you folks that may have heard it in your own constituency's office, is that there's someone with a tractor or a bulldozer in the middle of the stream doing some work. We'll be there immediately. Or you may get a complaint that someone had a bulldozer or an excavator in the brook a year and a half ago. It's quite not as urgent, but we'll still follow up. So our inspectors, who are trained in all these areas and to respond to these complaints, will go out to determine if there is a compliance issue, firstly, and then help the proponent or educate them on what they need to do or what corrective actions they need to take to make sure that they are in compliance. So that's a very important piece. Now, hopefully, through those interactions between the staff and anyone that's maybe doing that activity or any approval holder, that they will come into compliance. However, through all our opportunities to educate and show them what is needed to be in compliance, if they don't do that, then that can be referred to our team of investigators. This is another team that we've created about a year ago as well within the Inspection, Compliance, and Enforcement Division, whose sole responsibility is to investigate any complaints or concerns that may lead to further enforcement action. So this dedicated team, that's all they're responsible for. So it's great that they're able to dedicate and focus their skills and tools in one group, and it allows us to be very, very responsive to those matters. So we do have a strong inspection group up front, but also that enforcement team if we need to go down that pathway. And within that team, we have investigators that also work very closely with a dedicated Crown. If the need arises that we have to take specific actions to ensure compliance. And compliance is kind of, when we look at actions and how we determine what we're going to do, we look at their willingness to comply and the seriousness of the impacts. So, most people honestly are willing to comply, and it could be innocent. Some people tell you right up front that they're not going to be willing to comply. So we have to be prepared for that. And that's fine. We got the tools to do that. That could be summary offense ticket, it could be a law enforcement prosecution, or it could be a ministerial order. So all of those tools are available to our team when we're working with their dedicated Crown to deploy to make sure that we are protecting the environment, we are protecting the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and the land that we walk upon. So, I'm very confident in our response to any of these concerns brought up, whether it's on a wind farm or any other industrial activity or construction activity. We've got a very, very thorough response on that. I guess one thing I would like to add is that the biggest component of this is our staff are very motivated in the work that they do, because these folks also live in the communities where these activities take place, or they know a family member, an aunt or uncle, or a friend, and we get lots of questions when we're out there, which is fantastic, because the more we get out there, the more opportunities there are to educate folks on what we do and what they have to do to be in compliance with the Environment Act. So hopefully that answers the question.
Emily Van Exen.
Oh, thank you very much. It definitely answers my question, and I'll pass it off to my colleague.
Emily Bowlby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mentioned earlier there that I've got a friend in the windmill industry head in PEI, and my questions about economic benefits, and his dad has 2 windmills on his farmland, and he's quite happy with the economic benefit that every year the owner of the windmill writes him a check, and it's a nice check. So my question is, what are the economic benefits of a project like Wind West, and can you give us an updated sense of what jobs could be created and how much economic activity could be created and generated as well? Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
So yes, I've heard similar anecdotes from especially farmers in Ontario and other places where a turbine or 2 on the property is a good retirement savings account for them in many ways. And we see the same here in Nova Scotia, that there's a payment for every turbine on a property. We have a specific set of fees for turbines on Crown land, but we know that a lot of forestry operators in particular enjoy heavy wind. They produce really nice roads for the forestry equipment, include harvesting as part of it, and then receive those payments. With respect to the economic development, though, it doesn't just stop at these payments. And while it does seem like much of a turbine is an imported tower and imported components, there's actually a lot of local labor involved. These are pretty labor intensive for a period of time during construction, not so much during operations, although there are O&M personnel on site. But there's a lot of local contractors, whether that's clearing trees, building roads, pouring foundations, and then erecting the turbines. And sometimes that's a collaborative exercise across with people coming in, whether they're from PEI or further points west to work in Nova Scotia to erect turbines. For the offshore, the difference is that everything is more expensive, frankly. So the constructing projects takes more people, it takes more equipment, it takes more boats, and that's where a lot of the cost drivers are. But some of those benefits, we are unlikely to build a deployment vessel like you might have seen in the harbor. I think last week we had an offshore wind deployment vessel here in the harbor. We're probably not building one of those tomorrow. I think Irving Shipyard is already pretty busy. But we have the potential to produce other ships that are associated with offshore wind, with the supply vessels, which you'd see in the harbor, and then with all the people to support those. So whether that's bringing equipment out to sea or the operations and maintenance eventually on the turbines, so that it kind of spans both. And as Deputy Gatien mentioned before, for a project at the scale of Wind West, we see thousands of job opportunities during construction and a smaller number, but still potentially in the thousands during operations. And that operations period is 25 to 35 years. So it's it's a full career for people. You know, construction is going to be a multi-year process, and then operations and maintenance for 25 to 35 years. That's 40 years of work in our offshore just for one project. The goal, of course, would be to keep building so that you grow the construction workforce, you get to bring more people here with those skills and keep them here, or grow them domestically, so to speak, but to train local Nova Scotians to get out there on the water and deploy these turbines and keep doing that. There's also the potential, as we saw in oil and gas. I'm sure we all know folks who worked maybe offshore Nova Scotia for a bit, but are offshore Brazil today or Guyana or somewhere else in the world. So these are globally in-demand professions, and we have a history with good local training, good safety standards, and we can probably export that in addition to using it locally.
Emily McQuarrie, please.
Thank you. The world is a very uncertain place right now. And Nova Scotians want to know that our economy will be strong in the face of events like tariffs and other international geopolitical events. How will the work you're doing now with energy help make our economy resilient to these events beyond our borders and outside of our control?
Deputy Gatien, please.
Thank you very much for the question. Primarily, first of all of this work is for us to be as energy independent and have as much energy security as we possibly can within Nova Scotia, benefit Nova Scotians. But also, how can we help our broader country, Canada, in terms of energy security? We saw not that long ago when the Ukraine-Russian war broke out, the price of commodities, even coal, like tripled, I think, or quadrupled in price. Everything went through the roof. And so how do we make sure that we're not as dependent on those commodities internationally, fossil fuel driven, most of them? How do we start to produce our own energy here in Nova Scotia, have economic benefits for the citizens and the communities where these projects will be developed? And I know some of you might be rural, some of you are not, but it's not all going to happen in Halifax, right, which is big. Well, there you go. Me too. It's a benefit that many areas of the province will experience, and I think that that's what's most important. But it really is about energy security, energy independence, and then also helping Canada get there as well, and at the same time decarbonizing to some degree, in terms of the offshore wind and Wind West.
Thank you. I just, so you can't mention rural without I've got to kind of peek up here a little bit. But I just need to comment the benefits of to the local economy in Colchester County and Colchester North from wind turbines in particular, Everwind, but Higgins Mountain and those, So anyway, sorry. Emily McGilvery, please.
Thank
with
you.
Minute 40.
Okay, so this will be a Quick one, I've heard some claim that Wind West is just another Atlantic loop. Can you please explain what makes the project different, how Nova Scotia will benefit as a result?
Mr. Miller.
So while Atlantic Loop was a large-scale transmission project from Quebec to Nova Scotia, I think the critical part of that was it was Quebec to Nova Scotia. This is Nova Scotia West. So it is an opportunity to generate our energy resources and transmit them for profit from Nova Scotia. The Atlantic Loop was focused on decarbonizing our system through a contract with Hydro-Quebec. And there are a whole litany of reasons why that did not work out. Part of it was scale, part of it was cost, part of it was that Quebec does not have the energy to supply us. And we see that happening right now today, that they cannot meet their own needs like they expected they would be able to. So Wind West is actually flipping the tables and saying Quebec is the energy demand, not Nova Scotia, and we can be the supplier. There's certainly an opportunity to continue to work with Quebec to purchase energy from them. They have a different kind of resource than we have with their hydropower, but at present we are focused on helping them meet their own energy targets and do all the electrification and decarbonization of industry that they also intend to do. And that's how Wind West critically differs from the Atlantic Loop.
Thank you. So we've got 12 seconds left, so I'm going to call order, and that concludes the question and answer portion. Do any of our witnesses would like to make a closing statement? Comments? Deputy Gatien, please.
Just really quickly, thank you very much. We're very proud of the work we're doing, so we really appreciate your interest and your thoughtful questions. Thank you for giving us the time to answer them. I don't typically plug a video, but I am just going to suggest there is a video on the website, and if you just want to see the scale of what one of those turbine blades look like, if you haven't seen one, it is incredible to see that on the highway. So it's some really good visuals. That's my pitch for the video. Thank you.
Thank you. And Deputy MacEachern, do you have any comments?
Say I watched that video and it's amazing, so I highly recommend it. Thanks for your time and attention. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. So we're wrapped up the questioning portion. We'll take a 5-minute break and finish up with a little bit of committee business, I think. Yep. Okay.
I mean, do we need 5?
I don't know. I think we're all ready to go back to come back to order. So with respect to our agenda, I need to find it. So we have a discussion piece here. We've received a letter back from Nova Scotia Power that I have it on table. I don't know if everybody has seen it. Pardon? So you want me? So would you folks like me to read this letter, or? Yep, okay, so this is, it's addressed to me as chair, Nova Scotia Standing Committee on Natural Resource and Economic Development. I'm writing in response to a question raised by MLA Julie Van Exen during the Standing Committee on Natural Resource and Economic Development regarding the number of automatic payment cancellations. In her inquiry, MLA Van Exen requested detailed information on the issue, and I am pleased to provide the following response. Based on historical averages, Nova Scotia Power has noticed an approximate 12% reduction in automatic payments each month, which is approximately 11,800 payments per month. While Nova Scotia Power does not track the reasons for customers changing payment methods, most customers choose to make payments through the financial institution, and this was promoted by Nova Scotia Power as a way to make payments when billing resumed in June. Please let me know if you have any further questions regarding Chris Lantang, Director of Customer Care. Any comments, discussion on that? All right, our next meeting is scheduled for March the 24th. The invitations have gone out. We haven't heard much for responses yet, but the invitations are out, and the witnesses are again to be determined as the invitations have gone out. Any? Yep. Any additional, any new business, anything additional to take place? If not, then I declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.